Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the Senator from Van Nuys for reminding us to be students of history. My father, Kent, married my mother, Rita, 64 years ago this Sunday, and they married after World War II. They survived Nazi occupation. So when anyone uses a term like neo-Nazi, I really perk up. My uncle, Ed DeBoer, who sponsored us to immigrate to the United States, wrote a autobiography, and I proofed it for him. And during World War II, near the end of the war, as he was getting older in his teenage years, my mother had 5 brothers, so the older brothers, including Uncle Ed, had to hide during the war because the Germans would either conscript them into the German army or into factories in Germany. And so he wrote about how they built a underground location on the farm that they would have to stay in. But for teenagers, very difficult to be stuck in a dank, dark, underground hideaway all day long. And so he did get out. He was, a young kid. My grandfather had to punish him severely. He says, "You've got to stay hidden. We'll bring you food when we can at night, but you've got to stay in this shelter." So when we celebrated my mother's 80th birthday, I just asked her, what out of 80 years, what do you recall the most? And she said, well, we lived on the farm and the Germans came by and visited a neighboring farm. And they took the father, and they took him behind the farm, and they executed him. See, Nazi occupation was pretty simple. You didn't need troops all over the place. If you had someone that was out of order or did something wrong, you just took a neighbor, or you took the mayor, or you took an elected official or something. You just hung them in town, and that was how you controlled the population. So one night, the Germans came and visited her farm and took my grandfather. And they had 3 bikes. My Opa was in the middle bike, and the 2 soldiers were on each side. Holland is flat, but you have dikes. It was dark, and as they went up the dike and then proceeded to go down, my grandfather hit the brakes and took off along the dike to escape. And to his dying day, he remembered the bullets whizzing by. And he had to hide for the rest of the war. So I have no tolerance for swastikas or anything. I see these photos in the paper and it just makes my stomach churn. And we had a great Jewish population in Holland. We protected our borders, the country did. But when the Luftwaffe came in and bombed Rotterdam to almost obliteration, Holland surrendered within a few days, a few hours, literally, because they could not respond. So I have a real love for the Jews, and I love Jewish history in the United States and what they've done. And so I'm very sensitive as well to anti-Semitic acts and action. So I support SR 58 by the senator from San Francisco. So I am, in my community or anywhere nearby, get very disturbed when synagogues are vandalized. So I'm also really concerned, colleagues, when there's subtle persecution in other areas as well, like Christians and Muslims. But so I also support SJR, as well as SJR13. I also support the senator from Berkeley's SR 55, and I won't speak to that because it's kind of the same. But leaders need to practice what they preach. They need to mind their P's and Q's too. So we've got to be careful when someone says something where they lump everything together. They lump everyone together. When someone says, that half of Donald Trump's supporters belong in a basket of deplorables, that's just not helpful. Leaders can do better. We've even had rhetoric on this floor that we will fight in the streets. Shouldn't do that. We can do better. We should look at Cal Berkeley and say, wait a second, I don't know how you're coming to these policies, but we can do better. So we should not condone in subtle actions what we condemn in resolutions. We need to lead. We need to be the example, and I heartily support this resolution.